From athletes to authors, entertainers to innovators, we connect with those who help shape our culture. Join us in revealing stories of their lives and backgrounds, their triumphs and tragedies that molded them into who they are today. Authentically off-script and personally illuminating, this is Audibles with Jason Scarborough.
This week on Audibles, Dickie Scruggs, Part 2.
So you mentioned that about the whistleblowers and whatnot in the tobacco industry. That led to you guys being portrayed in a movie. The Insider. What was? Did you ever think that was going to happen?
No, I was doubtful they were going to make a movie out of a lawsuit. There wasn't enough sex and violence in there to make an interesting movie. But sure enough, they showed up in Pascagoula with Hollywood crew, you know, and spent weeks down there shooting that film, The Insider, with Russell Crowe and Al Pacino. And Michael Mann, the director, all these guys were Academy Award winners. And so it turned out to be a great experience, but I never envisioned that it would be a movie, particularly one shot in my hometown and a good bit of it in my home.
You got to hang out with Al Pacino and
yeah,
Russell Crowe. What was that like?
Oh, Russell's a great guy. He was a lot more gregarious than Al Pacino. Al was a nice guy, but he was sort of reserved. He didn't really get into the ebb and flow after the shooting was over, you know. And we had some. We'd all kind of gather around on our patio at night after the shooting was done and have a drink. And Russell and Bruce McGill, another actor in the movie, would go out there and play the guitar, and you know, some neighbors and friends would come by, and we'd have a big time. Russell brought a different girl every night. He was single. Why not? You know, he would bring these girls some Hooters over there every night, and so he was having a good time.
So you go with the success of asbestos tobacco. Mm-hmm. Then in 2007, you decide to take on a different kind of giant. After Hurricane Katrina comes through, you're taking on the insurance companies of America, the insurance industry. That's a different giant altogether. What gave you the confidence to go into that thing, or what made you feel confident about going into that battle with them?
Well, it was not a war of choice. Once Katrina came through and destroyed the Gulf Coast, including my home, and all my friends and family, and everybody were wiped out, the insurance companies decided they weren't going to pay anybody, and they were going to call it all a flood, a giant flood, and ignore the wind component of it. And so it turned into a major litigation that I felt like I was drafted into it, although it was a project, a litigation that I was passionate about. It affected so many of my friends and relatives and neighbors, and it put the coast back 20 years when that storm hit, and without insurance to recover, it would still be a wasteland down there. And so we had to sue them, and did.
Had some success too against the insurance
We had a good
industry.
bit of success. We did. One of my greatest regrets is that I got myself in trouble before I could finish that litigation, mm-hmm. and other lawyers took it over and did a good job. But it was, we'd settled, I don't know, we'd probably affected several $100 million worth of settlements by the time I had to drop out of it.
You were described, I'm going to read this to you, as a take-no-prisoners trial lawyer of international repute. Time magazine characterized you as corporate America's worst legal nightmare. I mean, you were in Time magazine, man. I mean, come on, that's a long way from Brookhaven, Mississippi, and Georgia Military Academy. So what do you think when you hear those type of descriptions?
Oh, I think that's a lot of hype. It makes me smile. You know, they can invent you and then they can destroy you. Mm-hmm. It's like that. But it was a good ride while it lasted. And no, I got some great press, and then later some terrible notoriety. So I've seen both sides of it, but it was exhilarating to be thought of that way. I didn't think of myself that way, but to be thought of as this great litigator, great lawyer, with all these accolades was fun. It was euphoric, and like anyone, I basked in it while it lasted.
Now, you were also described as a trial lawyer. Your skills were described as having a genius for determining strategies, developing an opening line of attack, assembling a coalition to carry out your plan. So, asbestos, tobacco, Katrina, preparing for those kind of battles, those kinds of legal battles. There's a lot of preparation that goes into that. So kind of what was your method of operation? What did you do what was a typical day of preparation like for you? What did you do to kind of get yourself prepared?
Before the tobacco cases, it was, we spent at least a year doing public opinion research, brainstorming different ways to do it. And we knew that the tobacco industry was ruthless in their defense methods, and it was not all in the courtroom. This was sort of a three-part battle. It was public relations, it was political, and almost lastly, it was legal. And we had to address all three of those components to make a successful case against a big-time company or industry like big tobacco in those days. And we didn't have as much time to do that against the insurance companies in Katrina because it was a devastating storm, and so we didn't have the luxury of planning. But by that time, I had gained a reputation, so I didn't. It wasn't that hard to put together a coalition of lawyers to help with it, and a lot of them did it on their own. They didn't need my help, and didn't. They were good lawyers in their own right, and didn't necessarily work with me. But it was a major passionate effort on all of our parts, going against the big insurance companies.
2007, that's when things kind of started to take a turn.
That's
and
right.
It's been well documented. Your time in prison, you spent 6 years in prison.
Right.
Released in 2014. I read a quote from your friend, John Grisham, who's quoted in the Wall Street Journal. That doesn't sound like the Dickie Scruggs I know, end quote. When you hear people like your friend John Grisham and others who had so much support for you during that time, what comes to your mind when you hear quotes like that?
Well, I got great respect for John Grisham. John came to see me in prison, and a lot of people didn't. But he supported me throughout the whole ordeal. But I made up my mind when I came home that I wasn't going to try to relitigate what had happened to me. I bore a lot of the blame for it and paid a high price for it. And there wasn't much use in going back over and relitigating it and trying to explain and, complain, explain. I wasn't going to do that. And people could think what they wanted to. Curtis Wilkie wrote a very exhaustive book about all the events that happened. And I might take issue with some of the ways he put it, but it was by and large an accurate reflection of that part of my life. So people that really want to know what happened can read that and get both sides of the story and see just what happened. But I came home, as you said, in 2014. I had some advantages that a lot of men who take that kind of fall didn't have. My wife stuck with me, came to see me every weekend. My family was close, tight. I don't think I lost any friends over it, frankly. And and I had money in the bank, which is rare for someone to take that kind of a fall. the feds tried every way they could, I'm sure, to take it away, but there wasn't any way to do it. And so I was able to maintain the money I'd made. And so that made it much easier. But having a wife and a family to stick by my side is what made it bearable for me. And then getting a sort of a new sense of purpose when I was in prison and teaching these other inmates to pass the GED. That's what gave me the idea when I came home to start Second Chance Mississippi, which is where we're sitting today, in those offices.
Don't go anywhere. Audibles returns in a moment here on the Spirit Media Network.
We're going the extra mile, and we're taking you with us.
We have a responsibility to get the work to the streets.
Join us on the Extra Mile podcast as we travel Mississippi highways to bring you in-depth conversations with state leaders.
Gotta have the ability to get their product to market.
Infrastructure stakeholders and Mississippi locals to give you a behind-the-scenes look at transportation throughout the state.
Highways, movement of goods, these are things that we rely on every day.
You can listen and watch episodes of the show by visiting gomdot.com/the extra mile.
Family owned and operated since 1986, Lakeside Molding has become the trusted source of architectural products throughout the South. They offer fine interior architectural moldings, custom millwork, and cabinet doors designed and handcrafted in Flowwood. Their showroom on Lakeland Drive is stocked with today's most sought-after interior details, including corbels, post, fireplace mantles, bath vanities, mirrors, and much more. Tim Shoemaker and his staff work closely to meet client needs for new construction, restoration, and remodeling projects. Lakeside Molding, where details make the difference.
Our favorite venues, watching our favorite teams while tailgating with the best fans in the South. We're all back to full capacity this fall. That's why now is the time to book your stay for your favorite college football weekend at Mississippi's premier full-service bed and breakfast. Kay Tyler and the staff at Cart Barn Inn will meet every expectation of you, your family, and your friends. Call and book your reservation today at 662-983-7829 or log on to cartbarninn.com. Cart Barn Inn, cozy luxury in a brown paper bag.
So I read that, and I've heard interviews and I've read quotes. It wasn't so much that people didn't know who you were while you were in prison. It was who they thought you were. Walk me through that, because I heard a story about the first day in the chow hall there. You sit down to eat, everybody gets up to leave, and you're like, the heck, so what did you find out that the code was in prison?
Right. Well, when I got to prison, I got a surprise. I thought I was being sent to a camp, which is a minimum security prison. It's like a small college campus, but you just can't leave. I mean, there aren't fences and barbed wire or anything like that around it. But next door to the camp I thought I was going to was a serious prison. A low security prison, which is a misnomer because it's much more severe than that. And that's where I had to do the first year, was in that confinement. And I had not prepared for it. And so as soon as I got checked in there, I just, my wife drove me up, dropped me off, and then, that was the last I saw of her for a month until visitation. But I didn't realize that that particular prison was a sort of a destination for a lot of pedophiles, a lot of men who, for whatever reason, I fit the profile. I was middle-aged, coming off the street, first time in prison, middle class. I looked the type of, apparently, of these men who were child molesters. It turned out most of them were never actually touched a child. They were trading illicit pornography, and that's how they got in trouble. But in any event, I didn't know those guys were there. I didn't have any, it never occurred to me I asked my lawyer before I went, I said, do I have to tell anybody why I'm there, you know, that I was convicted and pled guilty to bribery? And they said, no, you don't have to tell anybody, it's none of their business. I said, great. So right off the bat, you know, a couple of guys came up and said, Scruggs, why are you here? I said, well, I made a mistake. They said, yeah, what kind of mistake? I said, well, I'd just rather not talk about it. I made a mistake. And that was the wrong answer.
Oh.
Because about 20–25% of the men there were there for pedophilia. And so they immediately thought, because I was being invasive, that that's why I was there. And there's a code in those places that people who are convicted of sex offenses are ostracized from the rest of the prison community, the general population. They have to kind of stick to themselves. There's a unwritten code that men don't, the other people who are there for drug offenses and those non-sexual type crimes are, stay away from people that are convicted of what they first thought I was, because I wouldn't come clean with why I was there. And so going to the chow hall the first day, I got, you know, it was like a cafeteria, sat down at a table with some guys, and they got up and left. Just gave me a cold look. And that went on for several days. People wouldn't make eye contact in the hallways, and my roommate was getting nervous because I didn't tell him. He asked me why I was there, and I dodged around and said I just made a mistake, and you know, it's really almost none of your business. And so he was trying to get moved. He didn't want to be in the room with a guy like that. And the rooms were not cells like you'd see in a movie. They didn't have bars. They were just dormitories, more or less, inside the perimeter of the prison. And so after several days of that, probably close to a week, my roommate came up to me and says, Scruggs, he had a big smile on his face, said, Bob Stone says you're okay. And I went, okay, great. Who is that? Who is Bob Stone? Well, he explained who he was. The guy had been in prison like 30 years, and he'd killed a DEA agent in his younger years. He was a guy about my age, but he was sort of the head dog, the shot caller, if you will, using prison vernacular, in that prison. And the guy had gotten a PhD in prison, and he had read about my case in the Wall Street Journal. And so he said, oh, no, Scruggs is here for bribery. He's good. He's not a child molester. He's fine. And so my roommate, you know, was tickled to death, and word went around then that I was an okay guy. But this Bob Stone, you know, was my savior in there after a few days. Then it became bearable. But the guys that were there for those sex offenses had a tough time. Just being ostracized by the general population, and they weren't roughed up or anything like that, at least not to my knowledge, but they had psychologically, it was tough on them. So that was my first week in prison, was being, you know, thought I was a sex offender.
So you referenced earlier your time in prison. They find out that you're an attorney. Mm-hmm. So you mentioned the word earlier, drafted. You kind of get drafted into being a teacher. And prison, they require all inmates to have a high school diploma or get their GED.
That's right.
So you get pulled into this, and one of the first subjects you have to teach is math. And what I remember hearing and reading you say is math wasn't really your favorite subject, was it?
No, it wasn't. I liked it in my Rotary Club speeches. I say that's why I went to law school, so I could avoid any kind of math. But at first, I taught a sort of an ad hoc history course. A lot of the inmates were interested in that, and so I did that. I got permission from the prison staff to hold these classes, and they were just interest. You know, it wasn't for credit or anything like that. And then there was a vacancy that came up in the teaching ranks. In the federal prison system, if you don't have a high school diploma, you have to get a GED or sit in class until you pass the test. So that's one of the better aspects of the prison system, at least federally. I wish they did that in state prison. They don't. But the teaching, the actual instruction, is done almost exclusively by inmates, by educated inmates who become tutors, and that was the title, tutor, but you were really the teacher. You were in the room with the other inmates, and you were teaching them the course. The staff, the prison staff, wouldn't be in there. They'd be down the hall somewhere, like the staff at any kind of an educational setting. And so the inmates did the teaching, and they needed at first they needed someone to teach Hispanic students math, and I tried that for a couple of months, and that was kind of, until somebody came along that could teach them math that spoke Spanish as a first language. And I'd had high school Spanish, but that was about it. So I did that, and then I moved on from that to instructing in English math to prepare them for the GED. And so I essentially had to go back to school myself to learn the material in order to teach it.
I read you said how rewarding it was to see a light bulb go off for a middle-aged man who he didn't have any confidence in academic skills. All of a sudden, you're able to teach him basic mathematic concepts, and it's like you can see this light bulb go off. And I kind of get the sense from reading these previous pieces and seeing these previous interviews, it's like a light bulb kind of goes off for you at that moment too, in terms of, hey, there's something I could do to help people once I get out of here. Am I accurate in saying that there was a light bulb that went off then too?
Yeah, it did. Yeah, it was. I guess we both had light bulbs go off. It gave me the realization that I had some sense of purpose. Mm-hmm. That was the toughest part of prison for me, aside from separations from family and friends and comfortable surroundings. The loss of any sense of purpose, which I had always had and took for granted when I was practicing law and as a Navy pilot. I had nothing to make myself feel good about what I was doing until that came along. And I realized, my goodness, this is fun. I mean, and it wasn't so much that I was a great teacher of mathematics. It was a cheerleader kind of thing, because I, convinced these guys that they could, when they got out, they could go do homework with their grandkids or their children when they got home. These were guys that had lost confidence in their ability to do anything academic. And most of them were fairly smart people, intelligent. And they just, for whatever reason, life had come along and they had dropped out of school. And so it was a kick for me, and I did that for, I guess, almost 5 of the 6 years I was in prison. I taught these guys. And the prison staff was supportive of this. I mean, they had graduation ceremonies there, just like a high school graduation. The families come, watch the children are watching their dad graduate from high school. I mean, but it was still a big deal, so that was a rewarding thing for me, and gave me a new sense of purpose. But I decided to do that when I got out, and when I formed Second Chance, Mississippi.
Don't go anywhere. Audibles returns in a moment here on the Spirit Media Network. We hope you're enjoying Audibles with Jason Scarborough. Watch every full, unedited episode via our digital platforms. Download our free Roku TV channel simply by searching for Audibles on your Roku device. Look us up on our YouTube channel too under Spirit Media Network and hit subscribe. And enjoy episodes of Audibles along with our other original content. Bookmark our website at spiritmedianet.com and stay up to date on what's happening on the Spirit Media Network, where we're changing the game.
Family owned and operated since 1986, Lakeside Molding has become the trusted source of architectural products throughout the South. They offer fine interior architectural moldings, custom millwork, and cabinet doors designed and handcrafted in Flowood. Their showroom on Lakeland Drive is stocked with today's most sought-after interior details, including corbels, post, fireplace mantles, bath vanities, mirrors, and much more. Tim Shoemaker and his staff work closely to meet client needs for new construction, restoration, and remodeling projects. Lakeside Molding, where details make the difference.
We're going the extra mile, and we're taking you with us.
We have a responsibility to get the work to the streets.
Join us on the Extra Mile podcast as we travel Mississippi highways to bring you in-depth conversations with state leaders.
You gotta have the ability to get their product to market.
Infrastructure stakeholders, and Mississippi locals to give you a behind-the-scenes look at transportation throughout the state.
Highways, movement of goods, these are things that we rely on every day.
You can listen and watch episodes of the show by visiting gomdot.com/the extra mile.
March 20th, 2014. That's a very important date for you and your family. Why?
That's right, because that's the day I was released to home confinement. I was in a prison, a minimum security camp setting in Montgomery at Maxwell Air Force Base, which has been misnamed a Club Fed, and it wasn't Club Fed, but it wasn't Shawshank either. It was something in between. But I was released there, and my wife came and got me, and came home, came back to Oxford.
You could have easily decided just to, lay low, stay out of the public eye, but instead you said, I'm going to work. I'm going to do something. That flame, that flinter of hope that we talked about a minute ago, working with those inmates, it led you to found and create Second Chance Mississippi, which is, of course, we're sitting in this beautiful office here in Oxford now. A 501c3 charity helping people who have dropped out of high school get their GED and/or skills certification. You could have just laid low. You could have gone sailing. You could have gotten on your boat down in Pascagoula. You could have just chilled out. Why did you decide to found Second Chance?
I didn't want that to be the final chapter in my life, prison. I didn't want that to be the final chapter in my life. I knew other people that had been to prison, lawyers in fact, who had been real bitter when they came out. All they wanted to do was explain why they were screwed or victimized, and I wasn't going to do that. And I didn't want to just let that be the final chapter. And I'd been home several weeks, and I'd gotten in the habit in prison of waking up pretty early, like 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning, and listening to the radio. And I would listen to Mississippi Public Broadcasting. And one morning I heard a lady talking about the GED program that the community colleges sponsor in Mississippi. And I knew that they had changed the test protocol. The GED used to be, up until 2014, at the end of 2014, it used to be a 5-part test. And you had to pass all 5 parts, but you didn't have to pass them all at the same time. You could pass one and then come back and pass another. But once you passed all 5, you got your GED. And one part of that was math. And there were other, language skills and so on. But in 2014, at the end of 2014, they changed the protocol to only 4 parts. And anybody that had not completed by the end of 2014, had not gotten their GED, had to start all over. And so there was a big push by the community colleges, who I learned are the ones that actually administer the GED instruction and test. A big push to get these people that had begun, to get them through before the end of the year. And the test changed, and they lost all that credit. And so I got the lady's name. She was one of the officials at Hines Community College, who I'd heard on the radio that morning, and contacted her and told her who I was and where I'd been, what I'd been doing in prison, and said I'd be happy to tutor to help get some of these guys across the finish line. And she called me and said, look, can you come down and meet with me and Dr. Clyde Muse, the president of Hines, and let's talk about this. I said, well, sure. And anyway, Dr. Muse was a wonderful man, is a wonderful man. He's retired now. But he's sort of the godfather of the community colleges in Mississippi. He's the dean, if you will, of all the college presidents. And he encouraged me to set up, to do more than just tutor, to actually set up a program to sponsor people who give them financial help to get through. Not to do, in other words, more than teach, but to scale it up, where I'm helping a lot of people with what's called wraparound support, which didn't sound very glamorous, but it was necessary, because most of the population that needs a GED are one flat tire from dropping out again. You know, they don't have any money, and they don't have a job, and they don't have the ability to go to school and pay their light bill. And so that's what we started doing, and Dr. Muse and Colleen Hartfield, who was the lady I heard on radio, who's on our board of directors now, encouraged me to set up a more robust foundation, and that's when the Second Chance idea started. And at first I went around, I hired a young woman from Brookhaven, Caddy Case Beals. She's one of the Case family down in Brookhaven, and to come in and run this. I think I hired Caddy at the beginning of 15 maybe, and told her she was going to have to do all the work. I was going to take the credit, and she would do the work. And so we started together, went around and visited, at least half a dozen or more community colleges to find out what they needed. And what they needed was wraparound support for their students, something that gave them a little bit of financial support that wasn't available through any government means to help them get their GED. And that grew over the years into workforce training as well as GED. And I've learned now that actually workforce certification in welding, industrial maintenance, HVAC installation repair, nursing skills, that all these so-called soft skills are what are really more important nationally than a GED, because it signifies that you know how to do something, and it's backed up by a certification that's nationally recognized and accredited. So we started providing essentially scholarships for the students that were selected by the community college educators as worthy, and people that had shown gumption to get their GED. And now we've assisted over 1,200 young Mississippi adults in getting a GED and/or workforce certification.
Don't go anywhere. Audibles returns in a moment here on the Spirit Media Network.
We're going the extra mile, and we're taking you with us.
We have a responsibility to get the work to the streets.
Join us on the Extra Mile podcast as we travel Mississippi highways to bring you in-depth conversations with state leaders.
You gotta have the ability to get their product to market.
Infrastructure stakeholders and Mississippi locals to give you a behind-the-scenes look at transportation throughout the state.
Highways, movement of goods, these are things that we rely on every day.
You can listen and watch episodes of the show by visiting gomdot.com/the extra mile.
Our favorite venues, watching our favorite teams while tailgating with the best fans in the South. We're all back to full capacity this fall. That's why now is the time to book your stay for your favorite college football weekend at Mississippi's premier full-service bed and breakfast. Kay Tyler and the staff at Cart Barn Inn will meet every expectation of you, your family, and your friends. Call and book your reservation today at 662-983-7829 or log on to cartbarninn.com. Cart Barn Inn, cozy luxury in a brown paper bag.
We hope you're enjoying Audibles with Jason Scarborough. Watch every full, unedited episode via our digital platforms. Download our free Roku TV channel simply by searching for Audibles on your Roku device. Look us up on our YouTube channel too under Spirit Media Network and hit subscribe. And enjoy episodes of Audibles along with our other original content. Bookmark our website at spiritmedianet.com and stay up to date on what's happening on the Spirit Media Network, where we're changing the game.
So working with Second Chance Mississippi, I'm curious, all the organizations, businesses that you guys partner with, I'm curious, as you being the King of Torts back in the day, that was a nickname given to you, do you ever run across any former adversaries? If you do, how do those interactions go?
Usually it's lawyers that were on the other side.
Yeah.
But those were all collegial relationships for the most part.
Okay.
You know, I was a defense lawyer to begin with, and those guys, I think, were more ready to accept me than they would have been for the typical trial lawyer who didn't do defense work for a while first. And it was sort of a pedigree, had been doing defense work early in your career. And so I made a lot of good friends on the other side of who defended these cases, both whether it's asbestos or tobacco or you know, even the Katrina litigation. And some of that got bitter. And you know, it's like two athletes on during the, you know, that 60 minutes, they're going to try to knock the hell out of each other. But at the end of that, they're friends, you know. And that's kind of the way it was for me and the way it is.
And some of the phone conversations you and I have, and like I told you at the beginning, I feel like we've already done this interview in some ways through some of the phone chats we've had. You talked about when you did come home, and you were nervous when you talked about the book that Curtis Wilkie wrote. There were some nerves there, but it turns out you were more well received than you had anticipated. I got to ask, do you attribute that to Miss Diane? You got to attribute it to her,
I do.
correct?
I do. To my wife. I mean, she, as I said, that was the reason I was able to survive this. Was just through her tenacity, and she stayed engaged in church and civic activities here. She's right now on the Historical Society. We make fun of her on the Hysterical Society. So she stayed engaged in the community and made friends of her own, and people gave me the benefit of the doubt. They figured, well, okay, if Diane stuck with this guy, we'll, you know, he couldn't be all bad, so we'll give him the benefit of the doubt. And so it made me, made my landing when I came home a lot softer than I thought it would be.
You guys have been married for 50 years now.
Almost 51.
Almost 51.
Yeah.
So for people watching, what's the secret to being married that long?
You should ask her. Just compatibility and mutual respect and all the things that make a marriage. Common children, interest in our kids and grandkids. You know, we're politically attuned, and she's from a large family. I was an only child, and so she's always playing dirty tricks on me that she learned from her brothers and sisters. She's still doing that. And but no, whatever chemistry it is that keeps a marriage together that long, and I give her full credit. You know, I've tried her.
How often do you reflect back on that moment in the post office in Pascagoula?
All the time.
Yeah?
All the time. all the time.
You were confident the whole time you were gonna marry her one day.
No, I wasn't. I mean, she made me work. I mean, it took me 2 years.
Now I read that on that third phone call, that third time you asked her out, you said, "Look, you turn me down again. I'm not calling again." Is that a true story?
Well, I didn't put it just like that. I said, well, you know the rule. It's 3 strikes and you're out.
Right.
And she said, well, yeah, but call me back. So I did. I didn't tell you about her standing me up at the altar in Mexico, did I?
No.
I didn't tell you about that?
No.
Well, that's a bit of an exaggeration. But when I was in flight training, we had planned to get married in May, and a big church wedding in Pascagoula. And I got the bright idea that why don't we get married like 6 months before that, and we'll do it in Mexico. I was in flight training. The final stages of my Navy flight training were in Kingsville, Texas, which is just north of Brownsville, of Matamoros, the Mexican border. And I said, why don't we go down there and get married? We'll tell the Navy that we're married, and you get extra money if you were married in those days, and we'll just save that money. So then we'll have a church wedding and just get married again. And she kind of went along with that, but then she said, no, I'm not going to do that. We're not going to do that. We're going to get married in the church and do it the proper way. I said, okay. But now I have spun that story that we were all set to do a big wedding in Mexico, and all the officers had their swords drawn and all this stuff, and then she didn't show up. She stood me up. But that's an exaggeration. That didn't really happen. But we did. I did have the idea that we get married in Mexico and then get married again 6 months later.
So you still live here in Oxford, still an ardent supporter of Ole Miss, all things hotty-toddy.
Yes.
You even joked with me when we first started talking about doing this interview. You said, yeah, next time you sit down with Lane Kiffin for an interview, I got some suggestions for you talking about my sit down with Lane. And so is there a sport that, I know you enjoy football, is there a sport that you enjoy more than others that might surprise us outside of football? What do you enjoy in addition to football?
In terms of college sports?
Just Ole Miss athletics.
I wish they had a swimming team because I was a swimmer in high school and enjoy watching the Olympics in swimming. And Ole Miss does not have a swimming team, nor does State or Southern. I think they have one at Delta State, but swimming. But I'm not an ardent fan of most other sports. Football is it for me in terms of being going to every game. At least every home game. I like to support the basketball program. I enjoy basketball. I love baseball, but baseball's a slow game for me. Mm-hmm. I don't go to all those games that I could when I can just walk there from my home.
You still go to the Grove?
Not much anymore.
Really?
I don't. I don't go to the Grove much anymore. It's just, it's a big party. It's a younger person's experience. It's us old guys don't need to be back in the Grove anymore. I did for many years.
Yeah.
But not lately.
Okay, so what is your ideal college football experience? Is it in the lazy boy in front of the TV with a beverage?
We'll have a watch party, for away games.
Yeah.
But we have a skybox at the stadium here.
Okay.
And so we pack about 30 people in there every game. During COVID, we couldn't do that. Mm-hmm. But typically 30 friends and family, and my kids and grandkids like it now. And so it's a big event, planning for that. That's like doing a cocktail party every weekend.
So now's your chance to, if Lane Kiffin sees this interview, now's your chance to give him some pointers, if you want to give him some pointers on any plays or anything.
I'm going to say that. I'm not going to disclose my plays to these Mississippi State people sitting around this table here. I mean, you guys go back and tell Mike Leach, and I'll have blown it.
Have you gotten to meet Lane yet?
No, I haven't met him yet.
Okay.
No, I paid his fine.
Did you really?
I did. When he got a $25,000 fine for saying something about the officiating.
Did you pay it in pennies? He was wanting to pay it in pennies.
No, I paid it. I paid it through the foundation.
Yeah.
And I didn't hear anything from him, and I talked to Keith Carter. I said, well, tell the guy to at least.
Yeah.
So he sends me a text, thanks. That was it. I've never met him.
He's not very talkative.
No, apparently not.
He knows he's not very talkative.
You know, my wife and I don't go out a lot anymore, except usually at lunch. But I've never seen a guy on the street. I'm sure he's got his own life to lead, and doesn't. He's an interesting guy, though.
Very interesting, very interesting. I can say that from experience. Very interesting. I read you enjoy sailing and racing sailboats. Obviously, not in Oxford, right? But do you still get to do that?
Yeah, I do. In fact, we 2 years ago we actually won the race from Tampa to Havana, open ocean race down there. And I have a sailboat in Pascagoula, which is out of the water, getting a new bottom paint on it right now. But we sail mostly recreationally now. I sailed competitively for 20 years. Was part of an America's Cup campaign, and you know, try to compete at that level. And but now it's mostly cruising, you know, where you're just drinking a beer and not grinding and, you know, trimming sails all the time.
Don't go anywhere. Audibles returns in a moment here on the Spirit Media Network.
We're going the extra mile, and we're taking you with us.
We have a responsibility to get the work to the streets.
Join us on the Extra Mile podcast as we travel Mississippi highways to bring you in-depth conversations with state leaders.
Got to have the ability to get their product to market.
Infrastructure stakeholders and Mississippi locals to give you a behind-the-scenes look at transportation throughout the state.
Highways, movement of goods, these are things that we rely on every day.
You can listen and watch episodes of the show by visiting gomdot.com/the extra mile.
Hello, I'm Gary Jolly from the Tractor Store in Richland. Now's the best time of the year to save more with Mahindra, and it all starts with zero. Pay zero down and 0% interest up to 60 months. That's more for less on many of Mahindra's best-selling models, with tractors that deliver more lift, capacity, fuel efficiency, and built-in weight. So get zero down, 0% interest for up to 60 months on Mahindra, the world's #1 selling tractor, Mahindra, available at the Tractor Store in Richland.
We hope you're enjoying Audibles with Jason Scarborough. Watch every full, unedited episode via our digital platforms. Download our free Roku TV channel simply by searching for Audibles on your Roku device. Look us up on our YouTube channel too under Spirit Media Network and hit subscribe. And enjoy episodes of Audibles along with our other original content. Bookmark our website at spiritmedianet.com and stay up to date on what's happening on the Spirit Media Network, where we're changing the game.
So I always ask this question, and I get all kinds of different responses. So if you and I go hop in your car or your vehicle right now, what are we listening to? Are we listening to a particular kind of music? Are we listening to Sirius? What are we listening to?
Today we'd be listening to probably National Public Radio to keep up with the war in Ukraine.
Right.
Because that's big news. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. And tragic and dangerous, actually. Mm-hmm. If we're listening to music, it's sort of fusion jazz. Channel 66 on Sirius Radio. If you have Sirius, whatever it is, and jazz mostly, and news programs.
Jazz was not the music I thought you were going to say for some reason.
Oh, really?
I really didn't think it was going to be jazz for whatever reason. But I love it. So you're giving me something to listen to on the way back, by the way.
Yeah, well, Channel 66.
Channel 66.
Yeah, it's called, what's it called? I'll think of it in a minute, having a senior moment. The channel's got a name. Not just Channel 66, but it's Channel 66.
So you don't do podcasts or any of that
I
stuff?
I do. I listen to audio books and things like that.
Yeah.
I'm a big walker now. That's my
Okay.
aerobic exercise. I walk 5 or 6 miles a day as hard as I can, and I listen to audio books on different things.
What was the last book you listened to on tape?
A book on a biography of Henry Kissinger.
Oh.
Which I thought was really fascinating.
If you could sit down today and talk with 20-year-old Dickie Scruggs, what would you tell him? If you could sit down with 20-year-old you today, what would you tell him?
Boy, that's a tough one. I'd say wear a seatbelt. You're going to need it.
And just let him guess?
Yeah, just go with it. Try to keep your options open. That's some advice I was given by a naval officer early in my career. Try to keep all your options open. But other than that, I've had an interesting life. I'm going to say I'm proud of all chapters of it, but it's been a ride.
How often do you reflect on just what a wild ride this has been? And I've told you multiple times, your story is a story of, to me, of redemption, of showing, no matter what happens, your life can take a lot of different ebbs and flows.
In dealing with the ebbs, with the lows, one of the things I learned in the Navy, in survival school, was to understand that everybody in there has had downs in their lives and disappointments and embarrassments, and they've let themselves down and let others down, and that's human, and you've got to be able to live with that and understand that you're not the only one, even though you might feel like you're the only one. And I didn't realize this at the time, but most of the guys who were POWs, for example, in Vietnam, were tortured to the point where they had to talk. That's not a widely known fact, but they all did, because they were all tortured to the point where they did. And they felt terrible disgrace as a result of doing that. They thought they had betrayed their country and they would be court-martialed when they were repatriated. But in fact, that didn't happen. It was the other way around. But they had to live with that guilt for years. And that sort of helped me go through mine, even though I felt ashamed for what I had done and gotten in trouble and embarrassed my family and friends. And but that POW training, if you will, helped me, at least helped me rationalize getting through that experience. And so I don't sit around thinking about it all the time, but I'm 75 now, and so, the older you get, the less time you think you have, and so it makes you reflect back on some things. But it's been quite a ride. I'm not sure I'd change anything if I could.
It's a story I've been wanting to tell for a long time, and I want to thank you for taking time to sit down with us. Did I miss anything? Did I hit it all?
I'll call you.
Okay, you'll let me know.
Of anything. No, I think you've been very thorough and very, very, very professional in your questioning. Thank you, Jason.
I appreciate you joining us. I really appreciate it.
Enjoyed it.
Thanks for watching. We'll see you next week for another episode of Audibles with Jason Scarborough.